Lark Venn wasn't your typical arms dealer. For starters, she didn't fit the stereotype conjured up by smugglers and black market aficionados. Her hair was more "I just crawled out of a trash compactor" than slick and intimidating, and her wardrobe was a hodgepodge of military surplus and discount store rejects. But what she lacked in style, she more than made up for in sheer tenacity and an uncanny ability to know what people didn't even know they needed until they were staring down a barrel. Her depot was a chaotic mess of steel and dust, hidden beneath the ever-watchful eyes of the AI overlords who ran what everyone insisted on calling a utopia. She had to admit the place was spotless up top, all clean lines and hums of efficiency, but down here, among the discarded tech and surplus supplies, it was a different story. That's where the real business happened, away from prying eyes and AI penchant for helpful suggestions. Lark lounged precariously on a battered chair that looked like it had been through a few too many bar fights, her feet propped on a crate marked "definitely not explosive." Her partner, Jax, was fiddling with a contraption that looked suspiciously like it could blow up in his face. Jax had the kind of hair that perpetually looked like he'd stuck a fork in a socket, which, given his track record, might be true. "You know," Jax started, staring intently at a cluster of wires as if they might spontaneously form a coherent device, "I reckon if the AI found us down here, they'd probably just give us a friendly warning. Maybe a strongly worded letter." Lark snorted, a noise that could have cleared a room of aristocrats. "Yeah, and maybe they'd send a fruit basket to apologize for the inconvenience. They love doing that. Can't think of anything more threatening than a ripe banana." Just then, the depot's makeshift alarm, a rusty bell tied to a string, clanged as a new customer nudged the door open. Lark eyed the newcomer with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. The guy looked like he'd just stepped out of a life insurance commercial, all prim and polished. "New face," Lark muttered to Jax, who shrugged and continued his dance with death by electronics. "I'm here for supplies," the new guy said, his voice as smooth as polished metal but his eyes a bit too twitchy, a bit too practiced. "Supplies, huh?" Lark drawled, a smirk tugging at one corner of her mouth. "We specialize in those, don't we, Jax?" Jax grinned from behind his mess of wires. "Absolutely. We have all the finest non-regulation necessities. Fresh out of T-Cozes, though. You'll have to wait for the next supply run." The newcomer shifted, his expression flickering through a range of emotions too rapidly to be genuine. Lark's smirk widened. "You're new to this, aren't you? Let me guess you're in the market for something more dramatic." She gestured to the array of weapons that lined the walls, a motley collection of human ingenuity and desperation. The man hesitated, his polished facade cracking just a little. "I suppose you could say that." Lark leaned forward, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tell you what, I'll give you a special, first-time buyer discount, but you gotta tell me why a guy like you needs a toy like this." He glanced around the depot, his eyes lingering on the shadows between the crates. "Protection," he said finally. "Things aren't as perfect up there as they'd like us to believe." Lark nodded sagely, as if she hadn't heard that line a million times before. "Ain't that the truth? But you're gonna have to be more specific. Who are you protecting yourself from?" The man's smile was tight, strained. "Shapeshifters," he whispered, and the word hung in the air like a bad smell. Lark blinked, then let out a bark of laughter. "Shapeshifters? Oh sure, and I'm the queen of the AI utopia. You've been watching too much late-night holovid, pal." He didn't laugh. "You're serious," Lark said, the humor slipping from her voice like oil on water. He nodded. "They're real and they're here. Just, well, not very good at it, yet." Jax finally looked up from his project, curiosity piqued. "Not good at it? What, like they're misshaping into goats or something?" The man shook his head. "It's not their shapes they struggle with, it's us. They can't quite mimic what makes us human." "The unpredictability." "Unpredictability," Lark echoed, her mind racing with possibilities. That was one thing she could definitely work with. Just then, the lights flickered ominously, a reminder that even in her little corner of rebellion, the AI presence was never too far away. Looks like the universe is giving us a nudge, Lark said, standing and extending her hand. Lark Ven. Welcome to the mess. The man hesitated, then took her hand. Call me Smith, he replied, because of course he would. Smith, she repeated, rolling the name around like it had a bitter aftertaste. All right, Smith, let's see about getting you something that'll make even the worst shapeshifter think twice. As she led him deeper into the depot, Lark couldn't shake the feeling that today was the beginning of something that would either end in glory or a spectacular explosion. Either way, she was ready. And hey, if there were aliens who couldn't quite get the hang of being human, well, that was a problem worth solving. Or at least, a problem worth selling weapons to solve. The thought brought a grin to her face. After all, in a world full of perfect AI logic, a little chaos was just what the doctor ordered. Lark eyed the latest customer, another human with more nerves than sense, as he tried to decide between a plasma blaster and something with more teeth. The depot's lights flickered again, casting elongated shadows that danced like drunkards in a spotlight. Outside, the AI pristine world ticked along like a well-oiled machine, while down here, it felt like the universe's forgotten basement. Jax was still fiddling with his mechanical mess, probably one misplaced wire away from turning the depot into a crater. Lark wondered if the AI would send them a bill for the cleanup. Hey Jax, she called, her voice barely rising above the hum of machinery. You ever think about how we're basically running a daycare for the desperate down here? Every day, Jax replied without looking up, his fingers a blur over the tangle of wires. But at least the kids come armed. What did the new guy want? Protection from shapeshifters, Lark replied, as if she were discussing the weather. He's convinced they are infesting the surface world, Jax snorted. That's new. Next thing you'll tell me he's worried about invasion of the body-snatching T-Cozes. Hey, don't knock it. I've seen weirder. Remember the guy convinced his toaster was plotting against him? The AI do like to get creative with household appliances, Jax mused, finally glancing up. His eyes flitted over to Smith, who was clutching his newly acquired weapon like a lifeline. Did he mention how he spotted these shapeshifters? Do they have a tell like bad poker players? Apparently, they can't handle unpredictability, Lark said, leaning against a stack of crates. They fold like cheap cards when things get messy. Messy is our middle name, Jax grinned, turning back to his project with renewed enthusiasm. Maybe we can sell chaos as a service. Messed up ink has a nice ring to it. Just then, the depot door creaked open again. Lark turned, half expecting another jittery customer with a wild story. Instead, a familiar figure sauntered in, exuding an air of casual disarray that seemed tailored to fit the depot's ambience. Mox Talon, Lark greeted, her tone hovering between amusement and exasperation. What brings you down to our humble abode? Mox, a smuggler with a flair for the dramatic, shrugged as if he had all the time in the universe. Heard there was some kind of shapeshifter panic stirring up trouble topside. Figured I'd check if it was worth cashing in on, Lark chuckled. You heard right. We've got a fresh batch of paranoia brewing. Care to join the party? Mox grinned, a flash of white teeth in the dim light. Wouldn't miss it for all the bureaucratic hell in the galaxy. What's the plan? Lark gestured to the depot's eclectic collection of weaponry. We dig deeper, see what's really going on. If these shapeshifters are as clueless as they sound, they'll slip up sooner or later. And when they do, Jax added, having abandoned his mechanical beast for the moment, we'll be there to document their epic failure. Maybe turn it into a holovid series. The not-so-great imposters. Count me in, Mox said, looking altogether too pleased with the unfolding chaos. I've been itching for an adventure that doesn't start with smuggle this and don't get caught. Lark nodded. Great, but first we need some intel. Jax, you think you can rig us something useful? Maybe a chaos detector. Already on it, Jax replied, waving a hand at the half-assembled gadget beside him. Should be ready by the time the AI sends us another friendly warning. Perfect, Lark said, satisfied. In the meantime, Mox, see what you can dig up on these shapeshifters. Who's seen them, what they've messed up? Follow the trail of confused humans and broken appliances. On it, Mox promised, already moving towards the door with the kind of purpose that suggested mischief was afoot. As the door swung shut behind him, Lark turned to Jax. "You think we're crazy?" "Certifiably," Jax answered with a grin. "But if we're right, it'll be one hell of a story. And if we're wrong, well, at least we won't die bored." Lark laughed, the sound more bark than melody. "True enough. Now, let's see what kind of chaos we can stir up." With the depot humming around them like a mechanical beast dreaming of revolution, Lark and Jax set to work, preparing for a venture that promised nothing but trouble. And maybe, if they were lucky, a little bit of truth. The following days were a lesson in organized bedlam. Mox returned with stories that would make a conspiracy theorist's heart race, tales of malfunctioning AI, people acting out of character, and technology that refused to cooperate in the most spectacularly inconvenient ways. "The surface world isn't so perfect after all," Mox reported one evening, lounging on a crate-marked handle with existential dread. "People are starting to notice the cracks." Lark nodded, studying a map spread across a makeshift table. "Sounds like our shapeshifters are fumbling their way through an improv class." "You think they've got a plan, or are they just winging it?" "Hard to say," Mox replied, tossing a small, malfunctioning AI device between his hands like a juggling ball. "But if they're trying to blend in, they picked the wrong utopia. People up there are too used to everything being spotless." "Well," Lark said, a wicked gleam in her eyes, "let's see what happens when we throw a little more chaos into their mix." Jax emerged from a cloud of smoke that seemed to follow him everywhere, holding up a device that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts and wishful thinking. "Chaos Detector, Mark 1. Patent pending." Lark took the device, weighing it in her hands. "What does it do exactly?" "Think of it as a bullshit detector," Jax explained with a grin. "It'll react to any anomalies. Basically, if something's trying too hard to fit in, this little baby will let us know." "Sounds like it could be fun at parties," Mox quipped. "Or disastrous," Lark added. "All right, let's field test it. Mox, cover the surface. Jax, you and I will hit the usual circuit and see what turns up." As they prepared to leave the depot, Lark couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. It wasn't the promise of danger that excited her. She'd had more than her fair share of that. It was the challenge, the puzzle of it all. In a world where everything was supposed to make sense, finding the nonsense was a rare and welcome treat. The first few tests were uneventful, the detector remaining stubbornly silent as they traversed the back alleys and forgotten pathways of the surface world. The AI, it seemed, had everything under control, or so they wanted everyone to believe. But Lark wasn't about to give up. She knew better than anyone that the real action happened in the margins. Their break came on the third day, in a bustling market square where vendors hawked everything from handcrafted tech to suspiciously fresh produce. The place was a riot of colors and sounds, enough to overwhelm the senses and drown out any hint of trouble. Except the detector began to hum, a low, insistent vibration that sent a jolt up Lark's spine. She nudged Jax, who was busy examining a stall of vintage AI components. "Looks like we might have a bite," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jax glanced at the detector, then at the crowd. "Great. Now all we need to do is find a shapeshifter in a haystack." They moved through the market, the detector's hum growing stronger. Lark's eyes scanned the crowd, looking for anything out of place. A stutter in the AI vendor's pitches, a human who didn't quite fit, and then she saw him. A man at a booth selling what looked like repurposed kitchen appliances, his demeanor too stiff, his smile too practiced. He was mimicking the people around him, but doing a poor job of it like a marionette with tangled strings. Lark nudged Jax again. "There." By the smoothie blenders, Jax nodded, his gaze sharpening. "Looks like he's trying to sell a blender as a sentient companion. That's got to be some kind of crime." They approached the booth, feigning interest in the wares. The man's eyes flickered over them, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. Good afternoon, folks. Can I interest you in the latest in culinary companionship? He asked, his voice smooth but lacking the warmth that usually accompanied such sales pitches. Lark returned the smile, her eyes narrowing. Sounds tempting. Can it do taxes too? I'm in the market for an all-in-one solution. The man hesitated, his facade cracking. Well, it's more specialized in smoothies. Shame, Jax chimed in, picking up a blender and examining it with exaggerated interest. I was hoping for something with more personality, you know. Like, say, the ability to handle unpredictability. The man's smile froze, his eyes darting between them. Lark could almost hear the gears in his head grinding to a halt, the detector in her pocket buzzing furiously. This one, Lark said, her tone casual but edged with steel, is a little off, don't you think? Maybe you should stick to selling spatulas. They're less complicated. The man stepped back, a flicker of something alien crossing his features before he turned and bolted, leaving behind a trail of confused customers and abandoned blenders. Well, I think we found our shapeshifter, Jax said, watching the retreating figure with satisfaction. Lark pocketed the detector, her mind racing. And now we know they really are here. Time to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. With renewed determination, they set off after the shapeshifter, knowing full well they were stepping into a game where the rules were still being written. But that was just how Lark liked it. After all, chaos wasn't a problem, it was an opportunity. And in a world as cleanly cut as this one, opportunity was the rarest commodity of all. Lark and Mox stood outside the sleek, impenetrable walls of the high-security AI facility, a place so clean and sterile it made a hospital look like a dive bar. Lark adjusted her leather jacket, which was more patches than jacket at this point, and glanced at Mox. Why do I feel like I'm about to break into a sentient dishwasher? Lark mused, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You really know how to treat a girl to a good time, Mox. Mox smirked, clearly enjoying the chaos he was about to unleash. It's a high-end dishwasher, thank you very much. Besides, what's life without a little risk? You wouldn't want things to get too boring, would you? Boring is not a word in my vocabulary, Lark shot back, eyeing the entrance. It shimmered with the kind of security tech that promised instant regret to any intruder. Think you can handle this without turning us into a couple of fried eggs? Mox pulled out a device from his coat. It looked like a remote control for a TV designed by a mad scientist on a sugar high. This baby will scramble their security systems just long enough for us to slip in, like threading a needle that's on fire. Lark snorted. I love it when a plan sounds like a potential obituary. With a nod from Mox, they approached the entrance, the device in Mox's hand whirring to life. The doors hissed open, making way for them with a sound that was far too polite for what was essentially a break-in. Inside, the facility was even more pristine than the outside, an architectural love letter to stainless steel and white tile. Lark felt an itch at the back of her neck, like the place itself was judging her disheveled state. Welcome to the future, Mox muttered, his voice echoing off the polished surfaces. Where everything's shiny and nobody's happy. Shiny's overrated, Lark replied, keeping her voice low. It's the cracks that make things interesting, like finding an old sock in your new boots. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows cast by the facility's cold lighting. The place buzzed with the sound of efficiency, AI bots moving with the kind of precision that would make a clockmaker weep with envy. So where exactly are we headed? Lark asked, her eyes scanning for any sign of an alarm. Data center, Mox answered. If the shapeshifters are manipulating AI systems, there'll be traces in the data logs, like an elephant trying to tiptoe through a minefield. Sounds comforting, Lark quipped as they turned a corner, stopping short as a pair of security drones hovered into view. And here comes the welcoming committee. Mox clicked a button on his device, and the drones buzzed uncertainly for a moment before retreating. See, easy, as long as we avoid doing anything stupid. Define stupid, Lark said, her eyes narrowing as they continued down the corridor. They reached the data center without further incident, the heavy door standing like a sentinel. Mox worked his magic with the device, and soon they were inside, surrounded by stacks of humming servers that whispered secrets with every blink of their lights. Lark walked to one of the terminals and started sifting through the data. Let's see what our would-be thespians have been up to. As she worked, Mox kept an eye on the door, tapping his fingers against his leg in a rhythm that would have made a jazz drummer proud. Anything interesting? Depends on your definition of interesting, Lark replied, her fingers flying over the keys. Looks like they've been probing the AI systems, testing boundaries, routine stuff by shapeshifter standards. Like playing God with a cheat sheet, Mox said with a snort. Hope they left some clues, Lark frowned at the screen. They're good, but not perfect. There's a pattern here, like they're coordinating something big. Our mission just got upgraded from inconvenience to potential apocalypse. And we haven't even had breakfast, Mox remarked dryly. So what now? Before Lark could answer, the facility's lights flickered, then went out, replaced by the sinister glow of emergency lighting. An alarm blared, a grating noise that promised trouble in all capital letters. Looks like our welcome just wore out, Lark said, already moving towards the exit. Time to run. They sprinted down the corridors, Mox cursing under his breath. I knew today was going too well. First good coffee, then a high-security break-in. It's all downhill from here. As they reached the entrance, a metallic voice echoed through the halls, dripping with manufactured cheer. Attention, valued intruders. You are currently in violation of AI Protocol 1738. Please remain still until apprehended for your own safety. How thoughtful, Lark muttered, throwing herself through the door just as a security shutter slammed down behind them. I've never felt more valued. Outside, the city was in chaos. The AI systems, manipulated by the shapeshifters, were turning against the inhabitants. Drones buzzed erratically, sending civilians scattering, and public screens flashed nonsense messages at epileptic speed. Looks like we kicked the anthill, Mox said, surveying the pandemonium with a mixture of awe and dismay. Lark nodded, her mind racing. We need to figure out what the shapeshifters are planning before they turn the whole city into their plaything. And fast. They moved through the streets, dodging rogue drones and panicked citizens. It didn't take a genius to see the shapeshifters had adapted their strategy, using the AI-owned systems against the people they were designed to serve. Any ideas? Mox asked, as they ducked into an alley to avoid a particularly aggressive cleaning bot that was now more interested in sweeping flesh than dirt. Yeah, Lark replied, her eyes glinting with determination. We find them, and we make them regret ever thinking they could pull this off. After all, chaos is our domain, not theirs. Mox chuckled, shaking his head. You always did know how to make an argument for vigilantism sound appealing. As they continued, the city around them a cacophony of confusion and malfunction, Lark couldn't help but feel an odd sense of optimism. Sure, they were up against shapeshifters who could manipulate technology with a thought, but they had something the shapeshifters didn't: unpredictability. Because while the shapeshifters might be able to change their forms, they couldn't change the fact that they didn't understand the chaotic beauty of human nature. And in a world gone mad, that was the only advantage Lark and Mox needed. They reached a vantage point overlooking the city, the AI facility looming behind them like an unrepentant crime scene. From there they could see the full extent of the chaos, the spiraling drones, the malfunctioning billboards, the people below trying to make sense of it all. Mox leaned against the railing, pulling a cigarette from his pocket and lighting it with a shaky hand. So, what's the plan, boss? Lark grinned, her mind already spinning with possibilities. Simple. We find a way to throw a wrench in the shapeshifters' plans. We hit them where it hurts and make them remember why humans are the masters of dysfunction. And how do we do that? Mox asked, exhaling a plume of smoke that curled into the night air like a question mark. By being as unpredictable as possible, Lark replied. We don't just react to their moves, we make our own. We get inside their heads, figure out what they are really after, and then we turn the tables. Mox nodded slowly, a spark of mischief igniting in his eyes. I like it. It's reckless, dangerous, and just might get us killed. Definitely our kind of plan. Exactly, Lark said, her gaze fixed on the chaotic cityscape below. And if we're going down, we're taking them with us. After all, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's making a mess of things. With that, they turned their backs on the facility and headed back into the fray, ready to embrace the chaos and use it to their advantage. Because in a world where the rules were constantly changing, there was only one constant: humans were unpredictable, and in the end, that might just be enough to save them all. As they disappeared into the night, the city continued to churn around them, a living testament to the power of disruption. And somewhere amidst the chaos, the shapeshifters were waiting, ready to face the ultimate challenge, going toe-to-toe with humanity's finest agents of mayhem. The city had taken on the ambience of a raver's acid trip gone terribly wrong, with drones flitting about like demented fireflies on a crash course with anything above ground level. Lark and Mox navigated the chaos, moving like rats in a maze built by a mad god with a twisted sense of humor. "Remind me again," Mox said, sidestepping a drone that was doing its best impression of a confused bumblebee. "Why do we keep ending up in these delightful situations?" "Because we're masochists," Lark replied, ducking under a malfunctioning billboard that was displaying a particularly garish ad for dental floss. "And because everyone else is too sane to deal with this crap." "Ah, right," Mox nodded, narrowly avoiding a crowd of panicked citizens. "Sanity." I knew I was missing something. As they slipped through the alleys, the sound of chaos was punctuated by the occasional explosion or scream. It was like an apocalyptic symphony, composed by a particularly sadistic AI conductor. They needed to get to higher ground, assess the situation, and try not to die, all in that order. "So, what's the grand plan, or are we just winging it?" Mox asked, his eyes flicking to Lark as they paused behind a dumpster that smelled like it had gained sentience and was plotting revenge. "We need to get to the network hub," Lark said, scanning the surroundings. "If we can access the main node, we might be able to wrestle some control back from the shapeshifters, or at least throw a spanner in their works. They won't expect us to hit them there. Surprise with a side of sabotage. I like it," Mox said with a grim smile. "But knowing our luck, they're already 2 steps ahead. Then we'll just have to make a 3-step leap," Lark replied, determination hardening her voice. "Let's move." They navigated the chaotic streets with the kind of practiced ease that came from too many close calls and near-death experiences. The city had become a battleground, with every alley a potential trap and every shadow a possible threat. As they reached the outskirts of the AI facility, Lark paused to catch her breath. The place looked even more impregnable now, a fortress of steel and circuitry that dared anyone to breach its defenses. "It's like a giant middle finger, isn't it?" Mox said, nodding at the facility. "All shiny and smug." "Yeah, well, let's see how smug it is when we're done with it," Lark muttered, pulling out a small device from her pocket. "This is going to get messy." They approached the perimeter, where the AI defense systems were more active than a paranoid squirt on caffeine. Mox got to work with his hacking device, fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon on speed, while Lark kept watch. "If this thing decides to fry us, remind me to haunt whoever designed it," Mox muttered, as the device beeped and flashed like a cheap carnival ride. "Sure, I'll put it on the list," Lark replied, eyes scanning for any sign of incoming drones. "Right after I haunt the shapeshifters." With a final beep, the device unlocked the perimeter defenses, and they slipped inside, the facility looming like a sleeping beast ready to bite. "All right," Mox whispered as they crept through the sterile corridors. "Where to?" "The network hub should be up ahead," Lark said. "If we can get in there, we might just stand a chance of taking control. Or at least causing enough havoc to make them sweat," Mox added with a grin. "Let's give them a taste of chaos." They moved through the corridors with the stealth of cats in a room full of rocking chairs, each step a calculated risk. The facility's cold lighting cast sharp shadows, giving the place the ambience of an art gallery curated by an obsessive-compulsive minimalist. "So, how do you think the shapeshifters are pulling this off?" Mox asked, as they paused to avoid a surveillance drone. "They're using the AI systems against us," Lark replied, voice low, "puppeteering technology with a finesse that makes me want to hurl. They're good at hiding their tracks, but maybe not good enough. Well, just once I'd like to meet a shapeshifter who isn't a total overachiever," Mox said, as they resumed their advance. They reached the network hub, its door guarded by a security system that looked as though it would be more at home in an uncrackable safe. Lark eyed it with the kind of disdain usually reserved for traffic fines and cold coffee. "You think you can crack it?" she asked, glancing at Mox. "Like an egg," Mox replied, brandishing his device like a magician about to perform his greatest trick. "Let's just hope it's not a rotten one." While Mox worked, Lark kept an ear out, the hum of the facility a constant reminder of the stakes. Every beep from Mox's device was a promise of either victory or imminent disaster. "Any second now," Mox said, as the security system gave a reluctant click and the door hissed open. Inside, the network hub was a labyrinth of cables and screens, each one a potential Pandora's box of information. Lark moved to one of the terminals, fingers flying over the keyboard like an old-world pianist playing for their life. "Anything juicy?" Mox asked from his position by the door. "Plenty," Lark replied, her eyes scanning the data. "Looks like they've integrated themselves pretty deep, but there's a pattern here. They're not perfect, just clever." "Well, let's hope cleverness has its limits," Mox said, glancing nervously down the corridor. "We need to move fast." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the facility, a reminder that their time was running out. Lark worked faster, each keystroke a step towards either salvation or catastrophe. "Got it," she said at last, pulling a drive from the terminal. "This should give us some leverage. Now we just need to get out of here." They moved towards the exit, the sound of footsteps growing louder. It was like being in a horror film with a budget for special effects but no escape route. "Think we can make it?" Mox asked, voice tight with anticipation. "We don't have a choice," Lark replied, her grip on the drive firm. "Let's go." They sprinted through the corridors, dodging drones and security systems that had finally woken up to their presence. The facility was closing in around them, each step a race against time. As they reached the outer perimeter, a familiar voice echoed through the halls, the AI tone as patronizing as a kindergarten teacher talking to a delinquent child. "Attention, valued intruders. Your unauthorized actions have been noted. Please remain calm as corrective measures are implemented." "Corrective measures, my ass," Mox muttered. As they broke into the open air, the city skyline a jagged silhouette against the night sky. They hit the streets, the chaos of the city a constant companion, weaving through the pandemonium with the kind of reckless abandon usually reserved for people with nothing left to lose. "All right," Lark said, breathless but determined. "We've got the data. Now we just need to figure out what the hell it means. Preferably before the shapeshifters turn us into a performance art piece," Mox added, wiping sweat from his brow. They found a temporary refuge in a dilapidated storefront, the windows shattered and the shelves bare. It was as good a place as any to catch their breath and regroup. "Okay," Lark said, plugging the drive into a portable terminal. "Let's see what secrets these bastards have been hiding." The data unfolded before them, a complex web of connections and commands that painted a picture of the shapeshifters' plans. It was ambitious, to say the least, a scheme to seize control of the AI systems and turn the city into their playground. "Looks like they're planning something big," Mox said, eyes scanning the screen. "Something that makes this whole mess look like a warm-up act." "Yeah," Lark replied, her mind racing. "But if we can find the linchpin of their plan, we might be able to stop it." "Hit him where it hurts." "Well, let's find it before they realize we're onto them," Mox said, his voice tinged with urgency. They worked in silence, sifting through the data with the kind of focus that came from knowing they were playing with fire, and that the fire was playing back. "Here," Lark said, pointing to a set of coordinates. Looks like this is their main control point. If we can get to it, we might be able to shut them down. Perfect, Mox said, leaning back with a smile that was more grimace than grin. A showdown at the heart of the beast, just like old times. Yeah, Lark replied, standing and stretching. Let's just hope we don't become the beast's next meal. They gathered their things and prepared to move, the city still roiling with chaos outside. But for the first time they had a plan, a way to fight back and maybe even turn the tide. As they stepped back into the night, the city seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a chaotic organism fighting against its own destruction. It was a mess, but it was their mess, and Lark and Mox were determined to see it through to the end. Ready? Mox asked, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Always, Lark replied, her voice strong and steady. Together they set off towards the coordinates, the promise of danger and destruction lying ahead. It was a dance with death, but they were nothing if not excellent dancers. And as they plunged into the chaos once more, they knew one thing for certain. The shapeshifters had never faced anything like them before. The city had a way of assaulting the senses like a particularly aggressive street vendor. Explosions punctuated the night like exclamation marks written by someone who couldn't find the period key. Neon lights flickered erratically, casting colors that didn't exist in any sane spectrum. Lark Venn, arms dealer and perpetual thorn in the side of anything resembling order, navigated the chaos with the grace of someone who'd long since stopped caring if their shoes got dirty. "Keep up, Mox," she called over her shoulder, though she realized a heartbeat later that the expected response didn't come. The usual quip to her jab was absent, like a comedian forgetting the punchline. She stopped and turned, the crowd parting around her like she had the plague, or worse, an unpaid tab. No sign of Mox. A pang of worry mixed with annoyance. Wasn't like him to drop out of a good disaster. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford, so she opted for anger, more energizing and less likely to make her heart explode. She tapped a small device on her wrist, one of Mox's ingenious inventions that worked about half the time and exploded the other half. The screen showed static, the technological equivalent of a middle finger. "Great. Just great," she muttered, pocketing the useless tech. "One day he's gonna invent something that doesn't screw me over." The city was alive with anarchy, making clear thinking impossible. It was a living thing, a beast that had lost its leash and was now gnawing on the furniture. Shapeshifters had turned the place into a playground, and she was the unfortunate chew toy. With Mox out of the picture, Lark was left with nothing but her wits and a dwindling supply of patience. She needed a new plan, and fast. The last thing she needed was to become the evening news headline. Local arms dealer mysteriously disappears. City briefly notices. She ducked into an alley, ignoring the smell that could strip paint. The darkness was comforting, like an old coat that you didn't remember being so full of holes. She needed to go underground, literally and figuratively, find a place where the shapeshifters couldn't find her, and hopefully figure out how to turn this mess into something resembling a win. Down the alley, she spied a manhole cover. It might as well have had a neon sign screaming escape route. With a grunt and a curse at whoever designed the damn things to be so heavy, she pried it open and descended into the bowels of the city, trading one chaotic world for another. The sewer was a different brand of hell, one without the charm of neon lights or the unpredictability of stray energy bolts. It was cold, damp, and smelled worse than the time she'd accidentally left a protein shake in her bag for a week. But it was quiet, and that was worth more than all the gold in the system right now. She activated her wrist light, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife through pudding, a damned thick pudding. The tunnels stretched out, a labyrinth that could easily become a tomb if she wasn't careful. But Lark was nothing if not resourceful, or at least stubborn enough to pretend to be. "All right, Mox," she muttered to herself, voice echoing off the walls. "You're not getting off the hook that easy. Hope you're not tied up with anything too serious." It was a pitiful stab at humor, but it kept her moving. The tunnels were a maze, each turn a decision that could lead her further into the underground or right into a nest of shapeshifters. She hadn't survived this long by relying on luck. She forced herself to focus, to think like the enemy. They'd be looking for her topside, counting on panic to drive her into the open. But down here, she had the element of surprise. She came to a junction, glancing at the markings on the walls. They were the graffiti of the subterranean world, left by those with too much time and too little common sense. Most were the usual fare: profanities, declarations of love, philosophical musings on the futility of existence. But one symbol caught her eye, a crude drawing of a key. It was a sign, an old contact's way of marking safe passage. "Well, looks like someone's still fighting the good fight," she said, tracing the symbol. It was a small comfort to know she wasn't the only one trying to kick back against the chaos. Following the markings, she moved deeper into the tunnels, each step taking her further from the surface and hopefully closer to some answers. Somewhere above, the city continued its symphony of destruction, a reminder of the stakes. Mox was up there somewhere, and she couldn't let him down. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was personal. She had to find a way to turn the tide, to take back control from the shapeshifters and shove a wrench in their plans. After what felt like hours, she reached a door. It was a relic, a rusted piece of history left behind when the world decided to move up and out. She pushed it open, the hinges protesting with a sound like a dying cat. Inside, a room greeted her with the sparse decor of forgotten resistance: old monitors, a couple of chairs, and a table with more dust than surface. She settled into a chair, pulling out the drive they'd risked everything to obtain. The data was her only leverage, the one thing that might give her a fighting chance. She connected it to a terminal, waiting as the ancient machine groaned to life. The information spilled onto the screen, a chaotic mix of numbers and diagrams that would have made sense to Mox in a heartbeat. For her, it was like trying to read poetry in a foreign language. She scrolled through, trying to find the pattern, the key that would unlock the shapeshifter's plan. As she worked, the weight of the situation pressed down. Alone, underground, with enemies who could be anywhere and allies who were nowhere to be found. It was a bleak picture, the kind that encouraged resignation and despair. But Lark had never been one to lie down and accept the inevitable. She was more the type to punch inevitability in the face and ask for its lunch money. The screen flickered and she found it, a file marked Control Nexus. It was the linchpin, the heart of the shapeshifter's operation. If she could disrupt it, there might be a chance to turn the tables. But it also meant getting back topside into the chaos without the one person she trusted to watch her back. "Mox, you better be alive," she said, though she was talking to herself as much as to him. "You owe me a drink after this." The plan was insane, which meant it was perfect. She couldn't do it alone, but the alternative was to wait for someone else to fix things, and that wasn't an option. The shapeshifters were playing a game, but they'd underestimated the sheer bloody-mindedness of humanity's refusal to lose. With renewed determination, she prepared to head back to the surface. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. The city awaited, a storm raging above, and Lark was ready to dive back in, ready to fight, because if there was one thing she knew, it was that the only way to deal with a storm was to become the eye. As she climbed back through the tunnels, her mind was a whirlwind of plans and contingencies. She was alone but not defeated, outnumbered but not outgunned. The shapeshifters had made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the sheer stubbornness of humanity. The manhole cover loomed overhead, a portal back into the madness. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. It was time to take the fight to them, time to remind the shapeshifters that they were playing in someone else's backyard. With a determined push, she heaved the cover aside and climbed back into the chaos. The city greeted her with a cacophony of noise and light, a battlefield waiting for its warriors. She was ready. She was Lark Venn, and she was going to show them exactly what kind of hell a human could raise. Lark Venn emerged from the manhole like a bedraggled rat crawling out of a particularly fetid pipe. The city hadn't improved in her absence, a fact she found both reassuring and mildly depressing. Explosions still punctuated the skyline like some overzealous DJ hitting the bass drum, and the air smelled faintly of burnt circuits and bad decisions. She pulled herself to her feet, brushing off the grime with the grace of someone who knew they'd never truly be clean again. Back to the land of the living, she muttered, though the living seemed a bit of a misnomer when describing the chaos around her. She adjusted her jacket, checked that her plasma blaster was still snug in its holster, and set off toward the nearest sympathetic dive bar she could think of. The place was called the Rusty Wrench, a name that did justice to both its decor and clientele. The door creaked ominously as she pushed it open, a death knell for any hope of subtlety. Inside, the dim lighting and thicker-than-average smoke provided a welcome cloak against the prying eyes of the shapeshifters. The bartender, a grizzled man named Tinker with a face like a roadmap to bad decisions, glanced up from polishing a glass that looked like it hadn't seen the business end of a sponge in years. "Lark," he grunted, which was as close to a warm welcome as she was likely to get. "Tinker," she replied, slumping onto a stool. "Still poisoning the masses, I see. Somebody's got to keep the city lubricated," Tinker said with a shrug, pouring a drink that probably had a higher chance of spontaneous combustion than it did of quenching thirst. She took the glass, marveling at the fact that she'd survived this long with a liver that was mostly just a passenger at this point. "Any word on the resistance?" she asked, knowing full well the answer was probably sitting right next to her, swilling their own poison. Tinker nodded toward the back, where a group of particularly unsavory individuals were huddled over a table, speaking in low, conspiratorial voices. "The usual suspects. Go say hi. They've been waiting for you." Lark resisted the urge to sigh dramatically. Instead, she knocked back the drink, feeling the burn all the way down, and made her way to the table. The figures turned as she approached, faces hidden in shadow, though one of them looked up with a smirk that could strip paint. "Lark Ven, as I live and breathe. Or at least pretend to," said the one with the smirk. This was Rogan, a smuggler with a penchant for gambling and a laugh that could curdle milk. "Rogan," she replied dryly. "Still betting against the odds, all the time, love," he said, leaning back in his chair with a creak that suggested the furniture was one insult away from collapse. "You here to even the score?" Lark snorted. "More like tip the scales. We've got a problem with shapeshifters deciding they own the place." Another figure leaned forward, this one with an eye patch and a demeanor that suggested a history of violence and regrettable tattoos. "You got a plan, sort of," she said, which was code for not really but working on it. "We need to make their lives as miserable as possible. They can't handle chaos, right? So let's give them a dose they'll never forget." Rogan grinned, a flash of teeth that might have once been charming if you were drunk enough. "I like the way you think." "What's the play?" Lark pulled out the drive she'd found, the one with the key to the shapeshifter's operation. "This," she said, tapping it against the table. "It's the heart of their control nexus. If we can disrupt it, everything goes haywire. But we need to get in close." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that suggested everyone was reconsidering their life choices, or at least their association with her brand of insanity. Finally, Rogan chuckled. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic. It's a curse," she agreed. "So you in?" The others exchanged glances, weighing the risks against the potential for glory, or at the very least, a good story to tell over drinks that didn't involve getting vaporized. "We're in," Rogan said finally. "But if this goes sideways, I'm blaming you," Lark smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. They spent the next hour hashing out the details, which mostly involved a lot of yelling, a little arm waving, and the occasional threat of bodily harm. No plan was perfect, especially not one born from desperation and alcohol, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. The idea was simple in its complexity, a distraction large enough to draw the shapeshifter's attention, allowing Lark and a small team to infiltrate the network hub and upload the virus that would disrupt their control. Tinker had offered up his bar as ground zero, which was generous, if only because the place was a fire hazard waiting to happen. "All right," Lark said, standing and slipping the drive back into her pocket. "We've got a plan. Let's make it happen." Rogan stood as well, clapping her on the back with a force that suggested he might have been trying to dislodge a lung. "You're either a genius or a madwoman, Ven. Why not both?" she replied, heading for the door. The others followed, ready to take the fight to their otherworldly invaders. The city was a beast, thrumming with energy as they moved through the streets, each step taking them closer to the heart of the shapeshifter's domain. Above, the neon lights flickered like dying stars, casting erratic shadows as they danced across the alleys and avenues. They reached the edge of the district where the network hub was located, a fortress of steel and glass bathed in the sterile glow of artificial light. Security drones flitted about like mechanical gnats, their presence a constant reminder that danger was omnipresent and likely insane. "Everyone know their parts?" Lark asked, glancing at her ragtag team of resistance fighters. They nodded, some with more enthusiasm than others. "Good. Let's raise some hell." The diversion began with a bang, quite literally. Tinker's bar erupted in a blaze of glory, the flames licking at the night sky with a ferocity that suggested they held a personal grudge against sobriety. As expected, the shapeshifters' attention was drawn away, their forces scrambling to contain the fire before it spread further into the district. With the path momentarily clear, Lark led her team toward the entrance of the hub. The security tech here was top-notch, promising instant regret for any would-be intruders. But they had an ace up their sleeve. One of Mox's devices, a little gadget designed to scramble the systems long enough for them to sneak through. "Hope this works," she muttered, pressing the button and watching as the device whirred to life. The lights flickered momentarily, a brief glitch that allowed them to slip past the defenses and into the building. Inside, the place was as sterile as she'd expected, all gleaming surfaces and lifeless efficiency. It was the kind of place where you'd expect to find an AI overlord lounging on a throne of circuit boards. But it was empty, save for the hum of machinery and the distant clatter of footsteps that didn't belong to her team. "Move fast," she hissed, leading them through the maze of corridors toward the main server room. Every second counted, each heartbeat a reminder that they were on borrowed time. They reached the server room, a cavernous space filled with rows of blinking machines, the heart of the shapeshifter's operation. Lark approached the main terminal, connecting the drive and beginning the upload. The screen lit up, numbers and code flashing across the display as the virus worked its magic. Come on," she muttered under her breath, willing the process to hurry up. The footsteps grew louder, closer, evidence of the shapeshifter's belated realization that something was amiss. The upload finished with a beep, the servers humming as the virus spread through the network. Lark grinned, the kind of smile that spelled trouble for anyone on the receiving end. "We're done. Let's get out of here." They retraced their steps, moving swiftly as the building came to life with alarms and flashing lights. The shapeshifters had caught on, but it was too late. The damage was done. The chaos would soon follow, spreading like a virus through their ranks and leaving them scrambling to maintain control. Back on the streets, Lark and her team melted into the shadows, disappearing into the city's underbelly where the shapeshifters feared to tread. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd done their part. They'd struck a blow for chaos, for unpredictability, for the human spirit that refused to be tamed. "Nice work," Rogan said, clapping her on the shoulder as they ducked into a side alley. "We might just survive this after all." Lark chuckled, the sound harsh and gratifying. "Might. But don't start counting chickens just yet." The city roared around them, a beast unleashed, the shapeshifters' cries lost in the din. It was a start, a shaky, reckless start, but it was theirs. A victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, one chaotic step at a time. As they regrouped, Lark found herself thinking of Mox, hoping he was still out there, still fighting. They'd need everyone they could get for what came next, the final push to reclaim their home from the creatures that sought to conquer it. The streets were alive with possibility, the future uncertain and bright, like the dawn after a long, dark night. They'd taken a stand, and that was enough for now. Enough to remind the shapeshifters that humanity didn't go quietly, that they wouldn't be cowed. Lark grinned into the dark, her eyes alight with fire. "Here's to chaos," she said softly, "a toast to the world and all its beautiful, unpredictable madness." "Here's to chaos," the others echoed, raising invisible glasses to the night, ready for whatever came next. The city was a lunatic's playground, chaos humming through every neon-lit street, and Lark Venn was right in the thick of it, neck-deep in pandemonium with a grin plastered on her face. You'd think she was about to win the lottery, not orchestrate the largest act of rebellion since the AI overlords decided humanity needed a nanny. But here she was, ready to go down swinging if she had to, and taking as many shapeshifters with her as possible. Lark stood with her ragtag team in the shadow of a decrepit high-rise, its exterior peeling like bad wallpaper. Their eyes were on the prize, the network hub looming in the distance, an eyesore of gleaming steel and glass. An architectural middle finger to the rest of the city, if you asked her. Beside her was Mox, fiddling with one of his dubious inventions, a device that looked like it could either save them or blow up in their faces. Honestly, the odds were 50-50, but in this line of work those were practically winning numbers. "Think it'll work?" Lark asked, trying not to sound too hopeful. Optimism in her world was like a cookie left out overnight, stale and unappetizing. Mox shrugged, that infuriatingly casual gesture that said he'd sooner bet on chaos than any of his own inventions. "We're about to find out. If it doesn't, at least it'll make a hell of a light show." "Great," Lark muttered, "because our plan would really benefit from more explosions." Her tone was drier than a Martian desert. Rogan joined them, smirking like he'd just heard the universe's dirtiest joke. "You two ready for some fun, if by fun you mean imminent death?" "Then yeah," Lark replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's dance." The plan was simple, in a this-is-a-suicide mission kind of way. They'd set off a series of distractions all across the city. Debris, explosions, and general destruction were the order of the day, a smorgasbord of chaos that would send the shapeshifters into a tailspin. It was like poking a hornet's nest with a stick and hoping they stung each other out of sheer confusion. The resistance had divided into squads, each tasked with their own special brand of mayhem. Lark's team would head directly for the network hub, where, with any luck, they'd upload the virus and send the shapeshifters' plans into a nosedive. As they moved into position, Lark felt a surge of anticipation. The kind that only comes when you're about to do something incredibly stupid, with a chance of spectacular failure. She glanced at her wrist, where Mox's device flickered uncertainly. "We ready?" Mox gave a thumbs up. "As ready as we'll ever be. Let's make these shapeshifters wish they'd picked a different planet to mess with." They moved out, slipping through the city's underbelly like shadows on a mission. Overhead, the sky was alight with tracer fire and the erratic dance of drones, demented fireflies in a war zone. The air was thick with the stench of burnt circuits and that metallic tang of impending doom. The first explosion rocked the city, a flash of light and sound that rattled teeth and sent a shiver through the spine. It was Tinker's bar, the rusty wrench, going up in a blaze of rebellious glory. The perfect distraction to kick things off. "Guess that's our cue," Mox said, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. They sprinted through the chaos, the streets alive with the sound of mayhem. Shapeshifters were scattering, trying to contain the uprising, but they were out of their depth. Humans were unpredictable, and unpredictability was their deadliest weapon. As they neared their target, Lark could see the network hub standing like a smug sentinel, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in its shadow. Rogan, ever the gambler, was already ahead, checking the perimeter with the ease of someone used to slipping past angry husbands and debt collectors. "All clear," he called back, gesturing them forward. "Let's do this," Lark said, determination etched in every line of her face. The team approached the entrance, where the security tech was poised to make their lives miserable. Mox stepped up with the gadget he'd been tinkering with, whispering sweet nothings to it like a lover coaxing a stubborn partner. "Come on, baby. Don't let me down," he murmured. A soft click and the lights flickered, just the window they needed. They slipped inside, the sterile hush of the hub a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Lark's heart thumped in her chest, a drumbeat of adrenaline and desperation. They navigated the corridors, the cold efficiency of the place setting her nerves on edge. It was the kind of place that would erase you without a second thought, leaving nothing but a smudge on the floor and a mildly annoyed janitor. They reached the server room, a cavernous space that hummed with the power of 100 machines. Lark moved to the main terminal, her fingers flying across the controls as she inserted the virus-laden drive. The screen responded with a flurry of data, the digital equivalent of a panic attack. Almost there, she breathed, eyes glued to the progress bar inching its way toward completion. But the universe wasn't about to make it easy. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, a squad of shapeshifters finally catching on to their presence. They moved with the grace of predators, intent on tearing their intruders apart. Lark's fingers danced over the keyboard, willing the process to move faster. "Come on, you piece of junk," she hissed, as if taunting the machine would spur it into action. Rogan and Mox took positions at the entrance, ready to hold off the impending attack. "We've got company," Rogan announced, brandishing his weapon like a talisman against the darkness. "Stall them," Lark replied, her voice tight with focus. "We just need a few more seconds." The shapeshifters burst into the room, their forms shifting and morphing with an unsettling fluidity. Rogan and Mox opened fire, plasma blasts lighting up the room in a deadly staccato. Lark's heart pounded in her chest as the program finally reached its climax, the screen flashing a victorious message. "It's done," she shouted, pulling the drive free. They fell back, retreating from the server room as alarms blared around them. The virus was in, a digital wrecking ball that would send the shapeshifters' network into a tailspin. But getting out was another matter entirely. The building was on high alert, and the shapeshifters weren't about to let them leave without a fight. They sprinted through the corridors, plasma fire singing the air around them. "Run like your life depends on it," Rogan called, his voice a blend of adrenaline and dark humor. "Because it probably does." They burst out onto the street, the night alive with chaos. The shapeshifters were scrambling, their ranks in disarray as the virus spread through their systems. Lark led her team through the pandemonium, weaving through explosions and firefights with the grace of someone who had nothing left to lose. The city was a battleground, the streets alive with the sound of humanity's defiance. As they dove into an alley, Lark spared a glance back at the network hub. It was still standing, but it wavered under the assault, a titan on shaky legs. The shapeshifters' cries echoed in the night, a chorus of confusion and fury as their controls slipped through their fingers. "Did we really just pull that off?" Mox asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Lark laughed, the sound wild and victorious. "I think we did. Let's hope it sticks." They regrouped, their breaths mingling in the chill night air. Around them, the city was alive with possibility, the future as uncertain as ever. But for now, they'd won. They'd thrown a wrench into the machine, and the shapeshifters were left to pick up the pieces. "Here's to chaos," Lark said, raising an imaginary glass to the sky. It was a toast to their victory, to their resilience, to the unpredictable spirit that refused to be broken. "Here's to chaos," the others echoed, their voices a defiant murmur in the night. The city roared with life around them, a beast reborn in the aftermath of destruction. But Lark knew this was only the beginning. The shapeshifters would regroup, and the battle was far from over. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, they'd revel in the chaos they'd wrought, a testament to the power of human unpredictability. As they melted into the shadows, Lark felt a sense of satisfaction settle over her. They'd taken a stand, and that was enough for now. Enough to remind the universe that humans didn't go quietly into the night. "Let's get moving," Lark said, leading her team into the city's underbelly. "We've got work to do." The streets swallowed them up, the night alive with the promise of more battles to come. But for now, they'd savor their victory, one chaotic step at a time. The city looked like it had thrown a wild party and forgotten to invite the cleanup crew. Smoldering, wreckage dotted the landscape like an art installation by someone with a fondness for fire and chaos. The shapeshifters had been sent packing, leaving behind a city in sore need of a good therapist and maybe a stiff drink. Lark and Mox stood amidst the ruins, the acrid tang of burnt circuits still tickling their noses. "Well," Lark said, surveying the destruction, "I'd say we did a pretty decent job of not dying." "Always a bonus," Mox replied, fiddling with a new gadget that looked suspiciously like a toaster. "Think it'll catch on?" "This whole surviving thing only if we're lucky," Lark muttered, kicking a stray piece of debris. "Luck's like a good piece of chocolate, rare and usually gone too soon." They shared a moment of silence for what was left of the city, which was now attempting to piece itself back together like a puzzle with a few pieces missing. The AI overlords, usually so pristine and efficient, were having a meltdown that could rival any soap opera star's worst day. Their systems were as scrambled as Mox's breakfast attempts. "Do you think they'll come back?" Mox asked, squinting at the distant skyline now marred by smoke trails. Lark shrugged. "Probably. But this time we'll be ready. We've shown them that humans are more stubborn than a mule with a PhD in refusing to quit." The two of them picked their way through the debris, the city slowly coming back to life around them. People were emerging from the shadows, squinting in the harsh light of a world that had briefly gone mad. They looked like they were waking from hibernation, blinking blearily at the chaos and wondering if they could just hit snooze for another few months. "Hey, look!" Mox pointed at a group of folks trying to ride a toppled kiosk. "Humanity's already doing its thing. Adapt, survive, and complain about it later." Lark chuckled. "Yeah, we're pretty good at that last one especially." They continued onward, weaving between impromptu meetings of survivors and hastily formed bucket brigades. "I give it 3 days before someone tries to sell a 'I survived the shapeshifter attack' t-shirt," Mox said, grinning. "Make it 2, Lark retorted. "We're nothing if not opportunistic." As they approached the remnants of the rusty wrench, Lark paused, taking in the charred remains of what had once been a rather questionable establishment. Tinker was there, of course, surveying the wreckage with a look that said he'd seen worse, and probably served drinks through it. "Hey, Tinker," Lark called out. "No more rusty wrench means no more glasses of whatever that was." Tinker turned, a grin spreading across his face. "And here I was thinking this day might have been all bad news. You gonna rebuild?" Mox asked, giving a wide berth to a particularly unstable-looking section of wall. "Probably," Tinker replied, scratching his chin. "Gotta keep people hydrated on something, even if it's barely drinkable." Lark gave him a mock salute. "Good man. Can't let a little thing like an alien invasion stop Happy Ior, right?" "Damn straight," Tinker said, his voice the gravelly rumble of a man who'd seen it all and still thought the universe was a bit daft. Leaving Tinker to his rebuilding efforts, Lark and Mox moved on, their path winding through scenes of industrious chaos as the city's residents began to clean up the mess. They stopped by the depot, their unofficial headquarters beneath the AI pristine surface. Inside, Rogan was already at work, sifting through the debris for anything salvageable. He waved a hand as they entered. "Nice of you to finally drop in." Miss Much Lark smirked. "Oh, just a little light homicide. You know, the usual." Rogan chuckled, tossing aside a piece of twisted metal. "Thought I heard some fireworks. Figured it was either you lot or the world's worst concert." "Pretty much the same thing," Mox quipped, setting his new gadget on a counter with a little too much care. They settled into the familiar, comforting squalor of the depot. The place still smelled like steel and desperation, a scent that had almost become homely if one liked the smell of perpetual rebellion with a hint of old sandwich. "So, what now?" Rogan asked, leaning back in a chair that looked like it might give out any second. "Now we wait," Lark said, her tone resigned but not defeated. "The shapeshifters will be back, sure as tomorrow is full of more bad decisions. We'll just have to be ready, Mox nodded, already tinkering with something that could either be their salvation or a very expensive coffee maker. Any ideas on how to prep for round two? Yeah, Lark replied. We'll do what humans do best. We'll improvise, adapt, and maybe throw in some sarcasm for good measure. Rogan snorted. Sounds like a plan. And here I was worried we'd run out of things to complain about. Lark leaned back, letting the hum of the depot wash over her. The city was rebuilding, and so would they. Maybe next time they'd even get ahead of the curve instead of always reacting like the universe's favorite punching bag. Here's the thing, she said, glancing at her team. We're not perfect. We screw up more often than we get it right, but we keep going. And that's what makes us dangerous. That's what makes us human. Here's to being a stubborn pain in the ass, Rogan said, raising an imaginary glass. Cheers to that, Mox echoed, grinning. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, the kind only shared by those who had faced death and decided to laugh in its face. Around them the depot hummed to life, a testament, albeit a slightly grimy one, to human resilience. Lark allowed herself a moment to breathe, to take in the weight of what they'd accomplished. They'd stood against the Shapeshifters, thrown a wrench into their plans and lived to tell the tale. And they'd do it again if need be. All right, enough sitting around, she said, standing. We've got work to do. This city's not gonna rebuild itself, sadly. We're too sober to avoid it, Mox joked, following her lead. Together they ventured outside once more, into the city that was slowly shaking off the dust and chaos. The people they passed were battered but not broken, their spirits as tenacious as ever. Lark and her team moved through the streets, offering assistance where they could, their presence a reminder that humanity was still here, still fighting, still unbroken. As the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, casting the city in hues of orange and violet, Lark allowed herself a small smile. Maybe things would never be perfect, but that was fine. Perfect was overrated anyway. Think we've got a chance? Mox asked, watching the sky with a contemplative expression. Maybe, Lark replied. Depends on how creative we can get. Creativity's our middle name, Rogan said with a grin. Right after reckless and stubborn. They laughed, the sound carrying across the city, a defiant melody amidst the rebuilding. For tonight they were victorious. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, but that was a problem for future them. As they walked the streets, Lark felt a sense of calm settle over her. They'd done the impossible today, and they'd do it again if needed. Because that's what humans did. They survived, they adapted, and they did it all with a smirk and a middle finger to the forces that tried to break them. All right, she said, drawing her team's attention. Let's see what else we can fix. We've got a whole city to rebuild, and I hear construction is a great way to work on your people's skills, or break them, Mox quipped. But hey, we're good at breaking things. Together they set to work, the city rising around them, a testament to humanity's tenacity and refusal to back down. The sky above was clear for now, but Lark knew that wasn't likely to last. But they'd be ready, because that's what they did. They faced the darkness with a smile and a sharp wit, ready to take on whatever came next. Here's to chaos, she thought, as they dove into the work at hand. Here's to humanity's eternal dance with the impossible, and here's to the future, whatever it might hold.